All right, welcome everybody. It's 9 o'clock. Let's get started here. I want to thank you all for coming to this 2018 beta class. This is the first of my new material here. But as always, my objectives when I teach this class, number one is to get better. I always get people who know so much more than I do. And my job is to really just correlate and combine it so the students pass their test. That's generally the number one reason the student is in my class, that they have to take the CISSP or they're interested in it. There was a time when people mostly took it because they were interested in it. Now it seems like they mostly take it because they have to. But I've been involved in martial arts since I was a kid, and I'd hate to feel that I got you to get your black belt, but you didn't know how to defend yourself. So we all obviously want to gain vocational knowledge and get better at our jobs. Now, there are sometimes things you need to learn for a test that actually maybe in the verbiage that they use or in the context of how you work, it would sound stupid. Router that knows how to bridge is called a browder. Well, maybe on a test it is, but that would sound stupid in real life. I've never heard anybody called a router, any device a browder, and all routers know how to bridge. So don't sound stupid to your colleagues. And number four, I like to say, get through life using the fewest keystrokes. And that's not just like a wise guy thing, but a lot of times when you take the test, there are going to be multiple answers that solve the problem. Well, whatever answer took less time or cost less money was probably the right answer. Right? This isn't a test where you have one right answer and three wrong answers. They can all be somewhat right, but one is going to be better. So they even word it sometimes on the test, select the best answer. And the best answer is probably the one that costs the least amount of money or took the least amount of time. But the overall objective, and this is actually a testable concept if you've looked ahead and read the ISC Square Code of Ethics. And historically, they've had versions of the test with as many as 40 questions on the Code of Ethics. The overall objective is to protect society, the commonwealth, and the infrastructure. So, to me, it's like Jedi Knight stuff. When I first started preparing for this class, when I first heard of the CISSP, that was something that I loved about it. That, wow, that is cool. It's not just getting good at technology. We're here to protect the future. The 2018 exam is, well, actually starting in last December 18th, they converted to computer adaptive testing, CAT. And that's good news in most ways, in that, for one thing, you're not going to be there for 6 hours. You have a 3-hour maximum. You don't have 250 questions. The most amount of questions you're going to get is 150. Depending on how many, if you get them all right, you'll probably get hit with 100. And the questions are not weighted evenly, by the way. So if you get something that, what the CIA triad, if you miss that, that's an easy question. That's probably worth a lot of points. You get every question right, you'll get as little as 100. Now, here's where it might be a bigger challenge. You can't review questions. It was very common in the old format that you might not have understood question 35, but then a question 122 made you realize what that was. And so you'd always mark things for review and then go back. Well, there's no going back. The good news is I've had a number of students take the newer version of the test, and they tell me the material's fine. They had no problem. So now in April, they're going to change the content of the exam. So they took 4 points out of operational security and they assigned it elsewhere, where the biggest jump in points is to communication and network. And it's only 2 percentage points. And the truth is, I don't really trust these numbers. One, there's a lot of overlap between the domains. Two, there have traditionally been 6 versions of the test. And one test is pretty evenly distributed across the domains, but the other 5 are typically heavy in 2 or 3 domains. So, and it was very common that the heavy crypto test was also the heavy network test. But some people would tell me half my questions were business continuity management questions. which now is kind of split between security and risk management and operational security. But their announced changes, though, content-wise, have rarely changed that much over the years. So I don't really focus too much on it. One big change that happened over the years was they used to have a lot of laws and people complained, so they took a lot of that out. Now, some books still tell you that they have you study for laws, but I've yet to have a student come back since 2008 and say you need to cover more laws. So I don't know how many laws are covered on the test, but apparently it's not a big deal. What's new for my material? So I like to change stuff based on what I think, what I hear from students and what I think is big in technology. Now, they have had both quantum computing and quantum cryptography questions on the test for like the last 10 or so years. In fact, I think it was 2005, the first time I heard somebody talk about it. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. These are so theoretical. They're so far out in the future. They're so right here, right now. IBM has a quantum computer that you can log on to from the web today. It's 16 qubits. It's not really practical for today's work yet, but it's moving very, very quickly. So we're going to discuss quantum computing mostly tomorrow, but this changes a lot of things for us in security. And we'll see more detail on it a little bit today, but mostly tomorrow when we discuss what Shor's algorithm. Shor developed an algorithm that realized that some of these so-called one-way algorithms, like the most famous being RSA, it's easier to multiply two numbers and come out with an output than it is to look at the output and figure out what two numbers went into it. It's easier to multiply than it is to divide. But actually, quantum computing can do this very quickly. So we have three big asymmetric algorithms that we deal with, mostly in any browser I've seen support, and that's RSA for the most part, Diffie-Hellman, and elliptical curve, which I've been touting as we've got to move to it, and Google has since 2012. Well, actually, they can break all of that very quickly with quantum computing once they reach a certain amount of bits. Now, what's that certain amount? There's a term called quantum supremacy. The fastest computers in the world right now are in China. They have, I forget the name of it, but it does something like 120 petaflop machine. A 49-bit quantum computer around there will be faster than that for some operations, including factoring, product of primes and stuff like that. And some people think we'll hit 49 bits later this year. We might hit quantum supremacy this year. So we have to move to better algorithms. And that's the term of post-quantum cryptography. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but basically just a heads up, that affects asymmetric algorithms only right now. As far as we know, our symmetric ciphers and our hashing ciphers are fine. We can just add more bits and they scale that way. They have been asking about artificial intelligence since I've been teaching this. I started teaching this in 2002. We have different types of artificial intelligence. You could look at it as either expert systems versus neural networks. Expert systems need to be trained, and this is all we've had for years, really. You train them like you train an optical character recognition. This is a letter A, and this is a letter A. But neural networks would learn on their own, mostly lab-type stuff. And the other one is specialized versus generalized, another way to break it up. So you could develop, IBM developed a computer years ago that could play chess better than any human, but it couldn't, play checkers. So we generally have, we typically have specialized AI. But, I mean, it's not exactly there, but certainly a great step was Watson winning in Jeopardy over multiple subjects. So it's generalized. And AlphaGo, and now AlphaGo Zero, was able to learn on its own how to play. They did AlphaGo with Atari video games, and this is the machine that beat the world's best Go player. But AlphaGo was able to beat Atari video games without being taught how to play them. It just played itself. AlphaGo Zero taught itself Go and was able to beat AlphaGo in a day. Since 2015, I've had a lot of students come back and tell me that they got a lot of cloud questions. So I keep adding more cloud technologies. So software-defined networking and SD-WAN, software-defined WAN networking, I add a little bit on there. And then also, I don't know where they are on this, but we typically cover, and if you get the heavy app dev test, you get a lot of database questions. Well, most of the database questions show us from our flat files to our hierarchical systems to our relational database to our SQL database. SQL is an ISO standard. But looking at these huge data stores, we've now developed things like called NoSQL. And it's not that I don't have SQL. It actually means not only SQL. So, and this actually kind of relates to how blockchain technologies work too. Working on something called Merkle trees, we're able to search things very quickly. And we'll introduce some Merkle trees tomorrow, which will lead us to how blockchain technologies work. You have to be living in a cave if you have seen all kinds of stuff on blockchain and Bitcoin. And I've been a big fan for years. I tried to get my wife, who handles all our investments, to buy, there's only going to be 21 million possible Bitcoin. So I had this theory years ago, back when it was around $300 in like 2014. I said, we should buy 21 Bitcoins. No, and she does a lot of trading. Her whole family's into trading. No, you don't know. It's going to go up, go down. We don't know, blah, 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 blah. Well, she started buying it when it was like 5,000. but she has these triggers to immediately sell it when it hits another value. And I'm like, will you just stop? Will you just buy them? Hold on. But obviously, this has taken over, and how these distributed ledgers provide a consensus protocol that's not just used for coin. They want to make DNS stronger. They want to do all kinds of transactions using these blockchain technologies. And blockchain isn't the only way to do a distributed ledger. There's also block vectors and hash graphs and stuff. So I don't know if you guys have been following that too closely, but I want to discuss that. I don't know if it's on the test, but it should be. Right. And certainly the technologies behind blockchain, digital signatures and hashing, absolutely will be on the test. I'm thinking of creating a test on just blockchain, or a class on it. The interest is really high. Actually, I'm thinking of creating a joke coin called Blatt coin, but we'll get to that later. I got really into AI last year. I have been teaching this class, I tell you, since 2002. And in 2005, Ray Kurzweil writes a book called The Singularity is Near. And students start telling me, you've got to read Kurzweil's book. And I glanced through it. I eventually got last year the audio version. And he won me over. I've had a lot of doubts about his stuff. Now, something we talk about in my class for years has been Moore's Law. And Moore's Law is probably more of Moore's guideline. But Gordon Moore, one of the founders of Intel, had noticed years ago, in the 60s, I believe, that the amount of circuitry they could fit on a silicon wafer was doubling every 2 years. And because the electrons now have less distance to go, we're actually doubling speed as quickly as every year. On average, it was about every 18 months, I understand. Now, there was an end to that. That only works until your circuits get so small that, the absolute limit would be 1 atom thick of a conductor, because then you can't get an electron to travel. But there are other physical properties that really reduce it. It's something like 10,000 atoms across, whatever. And we've actually get very close. So Moore's Law has been dying down. But that's not the end of processing doubling. And Ray Kurzweil had noticed that it wasn't the first time we've gone through this type of doubling. In fact, we had magnetic switches, we had vacuum tubes, and he feels that the silicon Moore's Law applies to what he calls the fifth paradigm. But maybe it's quantum computing. He speaks of three-dimensional computing. There's other things to use, graphene technologies, but we're seeing a consistent doubling of processor speed. And the way this works is there's a very deceptive point. And if you trace, say, processor speed and AI to getting near human level intelligence, well, while it's subhuman, we don't pay attention to it. Yeah. So it's as smart as an ant. It's getting as smart as a rat. It's as smart as a chimpanzee. It's as smart as the dumbest guy in our village. It's as smart as Einstein. It's smarter than all the people in the world put together. Because a smarter AI will start building a smarter AI, which will build a smarter AI, which will build a smarter. And we're going to, well, they think, depending on who you ask, we'll hit human level intelligence between 2023 and 2029. And this isn't, one big government computer or AlphaGo controlled by Google. This will be something probably available for like $1,000 on your phone. And then it'll just keep getting smarter and smarter. And by 2045, as smart as all humans put together. That's pretty impressive. And it's also a very challenging time. We live in one of the most exciting times up to now. We're going to see this, Lord forbid something should happen to me before then. But we have a lot of challenges, including I just saw another post of these self-driving cars that they're going to replace all of our drivers, all of the people who drive a car, a truck, a taxi, a plane are all going to be autonomous, and we're going to put a lot of people out of work. And when we create machines that do human work, humans generally find something else to do. But the rate that this is going to happen, we want to make sure that people are taken care of. That you can't just because you're not working anymore, you get to go broke for a few years until you find something. I think we have to get. If I use the analogy, if Amazon can lay off 90% of their workforce and replace them with computers, and then become 10 times more profitable, they can't just leave those 90% of the people. They should still pay them. And all over the world, they've started these initiatives of guaranteed income for people who are being replaced. And some people estimate that by 2045, none of us will have our traditional jobs. Of course, if you looked at the world, in 1800, in the United States, I think something like 85% of us were farmers. Very few farmers today, but we came up with new jobs. You know how many people in that time period were firewall admins? Not too many of them. So I'm sure we'll look at. Yeah, so that's Kurzweil's thing, and it to me, this is what I've really been just. I had a student last year bring it up in my January class, and I said, all right, let me study Kurzweil, and I've just been obsessed with this. In fact, Ray Kurzweil with a gentleman. Peter Diamandis has created Singularity University. I became a huge Peter Diamandis fan, and I joined his Abundance 360 group. And we're going to meet some people on Wednesday from Abundance 360 who are going to be joining us. And I advise everybody to take a look at that. It's a very positive way of looking at the future. Of course, there are things that could go wrong. You watch The Terminator. Stephen Hawking, a gentleman known to be relatively intelligent, he thinks it could spell the end of the human race. I'm not really that worried, to be honest with you. But I do believe there'll be problems. Just like self-driving cars will be much safer than humans, but there are also going to be some accidents. And if you're the human that died in that accident, it wasn't safe to you, was it? I just think we'll reduce it. We're going to learn a lot about that this week, that we're never risk-free, but we can reduce risks. And I think we can reduce the risks of AI takeovers, and because I think there will be mistakes. And our job here is to help reduce the number of mistakes. Elon Musk is another person who rings that bell of warning. And again, a relatively intelligent individual. We're also adding in a lot of devices to the internet. We've got 7 or so billion people on the planet, but we have a lot more devices. There's an average of like 5 or so devices per person for now, but some people think we're going to have 50 billion devices by 2020. I heard, I forget her name, a woman who's the CTO at Cisco speak recently, and she said that we used to be worried about some breach of security. Now we worry about a pinhole, because there's just so many devices out there, and we just keep throwing more. And each device has multiple sensors. We're going to have a very connected world. All right, I mentioned we're going to have some guidelines from my mother here. My mother, I told you, could speak 7 European languages, and she really got into the origin of words, and God bless her. But she was also very suspect of anyone. I like to think that that's how I got into security, was my mother's views. We grew up very poor in North Philadelphia. My father passed away when I was a young kid, and my mother she worked hard, but it wasn't easy for a woman, and she didn't have a college degree, but she was extremely well read. But she taught me, one of the most important things in information security. People tell you, and you hear this quote all the time from people, there's the things you know that you know, the things you know that you don't know, but it's what you didn't know that gets you. You left out a Boolean fourth choice. What about the things you thought you knew turned out to be wrong? When I was a kid, they used to have these, I was a comic book fan, and they'd have these contests, a little on the side, an ad for a correspondence art school. And if you could draw the picture of Skippy the turtle, send it into them, and they'd have a team of experts go over your drawing and see if you had the aptitude to send them money. So I draw it, and I show her, and I'm like 10 years old. I said, "What do you think?" She goes, "Oh, you're going to win." I said, "You think so? It looks just like it, doesn't it?" She goes, "No, you're going to win because everybody wins." I said, "No, they said a team of experts." Oh, Larry, that's what they want you to think. You know what they want? They want your money. It's what they want you to think. Some of the biggest malware infections today aren't zero-day attacks that take advantage of vulnerable systems, operating systems, or whatever that weren't patched yet. No, no, no. They're social engineering phishing attacks that got you to click on a link because you thought it was your bank, and that's what they wanted you to think. Or there's no free iPad, I used to tell my students when those were new. The other thing they told me is that she's always suspect of anyone. That's how they get you. She's always looking out for someone had an angle. They weren't telling you what they wanted. They just wanted to get you somehow. And even if you just took her to like the Chinese buffet, and don't fill up on the rice and the breads, Larry. That's how they get you. You eat the meat, you eat the fish. Which was really upset. They get you coming and going, Larry. First they raise the price and now they tax it. But also very important to us, this is an English test more than anything. I get some brilliant engineers in my class that fail this test, very technical IDS geniuses. And then I get lawyers that always pass because lawyers know how to read the question better. And they go, no, that's not what this question actually says. This question is asking for a process. Now, I don't know any of the technologies that they're discussing in this question, but I know they're looking for a process. And only one of these answers is a process. She could tell you the Greek origin of any word, and that will help a lot here. I've had students do forensic specialists in my class for many, many years. I've only had one forensic specialist that knew the meaning of the word forensics. It comes from the Greek. It means to be in a forum. It has come to mean the science of debate. And what helps you win a debate is anything that makes it obvious to people or evident. And that would help you in a test. Yeah, primarily an English test. Please understand those word meanings. Understand the context. Understand the semantics. If I ask you to bring me a picture of a dog tied to a fence, well, that could mean take a picture of a dog and tie it to a fence, but I think if you understood me better, you'd realize, I don't think that's what he meant. I think he wanted to tie a dog to a fence and take a picture of that. But the same sentence could be interpreted different ways. Please read your test questions twice. I always advise you to skim the question. They could be very long scenarios. Skim the question, then skim the answers. When you skim the answers, they help you understand the context and the semantics, and then go back over and interpret the semantics of that question again. And you read it with a fine-tooth comb, and then read every answer with a fine-tooth comb. Two very important words for us this week are cyber and risk. Many people think cyber has something to do with computers. No, cyber comes from the Greek. It means to steer. The carboryn was the helmsman of a ship. And risk. When you're steering a ship, you can steer out of the way of the dangers you can see. But you can't see all the dangers, like cliffs underwater. You see the island and it appears to be a few miles out, but no, it's right in front of you. Just that most of it is a couple feet underwater. And if you hit that, your ship is done. You better have been prepared ahead of time with lifeboats. You better actually have somebody stay awake. You can't have everybody sleep at once. Detection. And then lifeboats and evacuation procedures to respond. We like to prevent whenever possible, but you can't prevent things you didn't know about. And that's why we need detection and response. You can't prevent everything anyway. I can't prevent my HR people from looking up Social Security numbers. But I can look for ways to detect and respond if they're doing it inappropriately. I've been involved in teaching and in martial arts actually since I was a youngster. And actually, we're going to have this gentleman in the white shirt joining us on Thursday, Tom Updegrove, my coach, since I was 20 years old, actually. And I'm in my late 50s now. There's me getting my first degree black belt. I'm now third, working on my fourth. And Tom is a ninth degree black belt, but Tom is also a licensed penetration tester. He teaches certified ethical hacker classes, and he's just an amazing guy. He's 70 years old, and he just defies age. He's just amazing. For his birthday, he sparred and broke one of my brother's ribs. My martial arts brother. It's pretty funny. But he always hated masters. I started with him, it's late 70s, early 80s, and he hated martial arts masters. He said, I'm not a master, I'm a coach. And Joe Lewis was one of his coaches and also one of mine. Joe Lewis was the founder of kickboxing. He was the American father of American kickboxing. Joe Lewis hated followers. I remember him at one of his demos, he goes, guys, don't follow me. I hate followers. I make a lot of mistakes in life. When I do, I need help. You know who can't help me? Followers. They'd make the same damn mistake I'd make. He said, so a good leader is going to have fellowships with other leaders. I would need help from somebody who is better than I am in that subject. That's how we work well as a team, right? Nobody knows it all today. But as a coach this week, I'm going to be here to share my experiences with this test, to prepare you for this test, to present the information and guide you along. Inspire means to give breath, to give life to something, and encourage you. This is still a multiple choice test, guys. I mean, if I put a 1,000-pound weight in front of you and I said, just believe in yourself, man, you can do it. No, you couldn't. But the multiple choice test, you can pass this. Yeah, you can. But masters, we say, rule. A slave. A coach is a server. I'm here as a server for you. And you're the star player. Joe passed away in 2011. And I was at his last training class. And as he's taking off the gloves, he said, now, guys, when I'm gone, don't go teaching Joe Lewis style. That'd be stupid. The only thing you can honestly teach a man is what you can make work. Now, there are probably some things I could make work that you can't. But I'll bet you there's some things that you could make work that I never made work. And you don't want to deny your students of that. He was also good friends with Bruce Lee. He said, I was there. Bruce Lee said, his styles limited him. So he created his own style, Jeet Kune Do. Now, when he died, why would I go teaching Jeet Kune Do? You'd be missing the point. So he called his style the Joe Lewis fighting system. He had a code of ethics, very similar to our code of ethics in the CISSP. He says, I will not permit considerations of race, religion, national origin, or social standing to influence in any way my relations with my students. And I hope you guys feel that way. We've got people here from all over the world, and I hope you feel very welcome and respected here. So this is me. You could look at this later, but I've been involved in IT a long time. I also, I fancy myself some type of musician, but that's, my brother's a professional musician, and he would debate that. Actually, we had a great gig together for a while, and I hope to do that again. We were playing, this is an acoustic act in Florida in a restaurant. I would love to retire and do that. Yeah, I've been involved in IT though since the early '80s. I was IBM certified PC tech in 1985, and advanced connectivity in '86. This is where no, that was, I forget, it might be '89. That's where I learned about the 7-layer OSI model, which we might get beat up about on your test. And that's where I learned about how, yeah, the OSI is replacing this older technology called TCP/IP. That's going to go away. TCP/IP was dead. Yeah, we saw how that worked out. Certified ethical hacker in 2002. And I took that class, by the way. He was student teaching at the time, and then so he was also a student, but he was also teaching. The class was Clement Dupuis. Clement Dupuis runs csecure.org, and the single best place I'd recommend to go to for your CISSP practice tests. Cisco plus security, CCNP security, and then hacking exposed. And this doesn't prove I'm smart. No, Novell CNE in '89, but this just proves that I know how to pass tests, maybe. And I've been around a few years. Our daily schedule today, we're going to be doing security and risk management and asset security. Asset security used to be bundled in security management prior to 2015. And when we do risk management, we identify our assets, we value them, we assign ownership and then value them. And then we look for threats and vulnerabilities, and we do impact and likelihood. Well, they just took that asset part out and created a separate domain. So we'll address it in the beginning, and then we'll get a little more detail there. But it gives me a chance to introduce cryptography, because most of our assets are information assets here. So most of the protection of information assets is in cryptography. Crypt come from the Greek, means to hide. But we shop at the Crypto Mart for 4 reasons. We don't just get confidentiality. If Jeff and I are the only 2 guys with keys to the filing cabinet, and Jeff opens up the cabinet and sees something in there that he knows he didn't put in there, well, that came from Larry. That's how we get authentication. Related to that, we have hashing algorithms that give us integrity. When you digitally sign something, you get authenticity and integrity and non-repudiation. You don't get any confidentiality in there. And that's 3 of the 4 reasons you shopped at the Crypto Mart. So one of the things I like to warn very early is a lot of people equate security with confidentiality, but confidentiality often gets in the way. How many people here have hidden something so well that you yourself don't know where it is? I argue availability is probably the most important asset. And that's why or attribute. And that's why I think one of the most overlooked parts in security for years, and up until the 2015 changes, the #1 failed domain for me, without a doubt, was business continuity and disaster recovery. Because that's all about availability. Day 2 is security engineering, and I actually haven't been finishing that last year in day 2 because they bundled a bunch of stuff in there. So it's how do we engineer operating systems? How do we engineer cryptographic systems? How do we engineer physical security? Well, I don't even get physical security at day 2. I generally won't hit that till day 3. But you could argue that communication network is part of an engineering. We're engineering those network solutions. Day 4, we engineer access control technologies. And then we create security assessments to ensure that our architectures are safe, that they work as intended before we put them into production. And once they're in production, we continuously test them and make sure that they're still appropriate. So when we do a security assessment and testing, this is both pre-operation and post-operation. But then day 5, we look at the day-to-day operations. And we're going to look at big threats to the operation of, say, operating a car. You have general maintenance you have to do, but you also have big problems. Big problems come in 2 broad categories: accidents and malicious attacks. Right? Your car, you could just lose control in the snow and slide into something. It was an accident. Or someone could steal your car. So we look at business continuity and disaster recovery, and we look at incident response in operations. And then we go over software development security, which really goes over everything. We actually start over with another risk assessment. We engineer solutions, and then we test them, and we continuously maintain them. And most of our issues here are that we deal with in this class are software issues. So we'll look at the entire life cycle again through the software. If you get the heavy application test, by the way, besides I mentioned databases, I would expect a lot of malicious code. People write applications to help them get their work done. People write applications to steal from other people. So, whenever we perform a process or a project, we need to know the scope of that project, and that includes the scope of the question of a test. Try to understand what the test is, a question is actually asking. If I hire a contractor to build a kitchen for me, he has to understand what I want in that kitchen. What is the scope of that? I mean, are we doing tile stuff? Or are we just going to do linoleum? What size oven do you need? Garbage disposals. We have to define that scope, and then I'll get 3 bids. And the guy who says he can get it done in the least amount of time or least amount of cost, but meet the scope, is the one I pick. And that's the same way you're going to pick an answer. You understand the scope of the question, and you try to figure out which answer solves it in the least amount of time, least amount of cost. Edwards Deming created what's best known as the PDCA model, though I understand on the test they word things many different ways. It could be called the Deming wheel. But when you are going to do a process, first you plan. Maybe I'm going to play with my brother and we're going to do a show. We create a set list of the songs, and then we rehearse it. If I could get him to show up for rehearsal, but he's much better than me. He doesn't need that. I'm sorry, inventing. That was a big problem we had. Then we do the show, and I would always record it. And then so when people complained, hey, or me, the crowd rarely notices your screw-ups the way the other musicians do. I go, well, let's check. Let's look at the recording and see who actually messed up. All right, I'll admit that was me. But that was you. And then we act and we improve on that. And if I could get him to appreciate that, we would be in Vegas right now. The development lifecycle, system development lifecycle, in the context of applications, people often call this the software development lifecycle. It's typically known as the system development lifecycle. First, we start off with a feasibility. Like maybe I say to my brother, you want to play this song? And he goes, nah, dude, you need a choir. We're going to need like a 3-part harmony. It's only 2 of us. It's not feasible. But when I get a new car and I said, should I get insurance? That's not, you're getting insurance, dude. In security projects, we don't have a feasibility study. You have to do it. Then we have a project initiation phase. This is when senior management sets the scope. We understand the schedule, the budget. We understand the people, the authorities who are going to work there. Then we have to determine the hardest part, the requirements, the functional assurance requirements of the user. So if I were working, say back to that, maybe I'm a restaurant owner and I hire contractors to build a kitchen. Well, from the owner of the restaurant, they'll understand the schedule and budget. It's got to be done by whatever summertime, and you have $5 million. But to really determine what type of dishwashers they need and what type of sinks and garbage disposals and stuff, they're going to have to work with the people who work in that kitchen. This is often the hardest part of requirements, and the hardest part of development. We'll beat this up a lot this week. We're going to go over the SDLC, which some of you will get beat up a lot on the test. We're going to go over this every day. I like to develop my class this way. Then we design or architect solutions that meet those needs. Then you get subject matter experts, plumbers and electricians and carpenters to build or buy and make sure they meet the design. That's verification. Verification is ensuring that you're building according to design. It's said to put in 8 gigs of RAM. Let's make sure it's 8 gigs. And then you install it and you test it. And now you could have the electrician testing the electricity. You could have a plumber testing the plumbing. But the most important test is that the cook comes in there and the dishwashers come in there and go, yeah, this works. Validation is when the users accept the test, right? A user accepted. UAT is user acceptance testing. That's validation, that it met their actual needs. That's the most, it's like, yeah, you did put in 8 gigs, it's not enough. I run a lot of VMs and I need 16 gigs, dude. Oh, well, the architect said it's not my fault. Then you operate and maintain it. Whether it's a kitchen, which you have to, getting a kitchen's nice. Maintaining the kitchen every day, try training your kids then, right? You got to clean your kitchen regularly, and the quicker the better. As soon as dinner's done, my wife expects dishes to start getting done then. Right? Same with your car. You got to maintain your car. And then retire and dispose. Now, when I got rid of my car, it wasn't because I was getting rid of driving. I was just moving to a better car, a newer car. I retired the Microsoft mail server in the 90s for Scott Paper, but they weren't getting rid of mail. They were moving to Exchange. Now, when you retire a server or a system, a lot of times, if you're worried about confidentiality, if your mind's on that, you think, oh, make sure you scrub the hard drive. Dude, if it's top secret data, we have to degauss, that's electromagnetically wipe it, and then we put it in a shredder. Dude, what did you do with all the mail over the years, the actual data? I need that. We're a mortgage company. We're supposed to hold those records for 30 years. So don't just look for confidentiality issues when you retire a system. Make sure you have the data that you needed. Talk a bit more about that, but I used to do microfilm to actually it was called cold migrations in the 90s. There were people who were taking all of their records and committing it to microfilm, and then they had to be able to access this microfilm, and it was a pain in the butt. And besides, it's hard to search microfilm versus a database, right? So I used to take these microfilm things and convert it to a laser disc that would then go into an optical platter jukebox that made it a lot easier to access from a SQL server. And people are required to hold these records for years. And sometimes the medium itself, you have to make sure that medium can hold for X amount of years. Hardest part of the test, though, is understanding the scope of the question. And if you read it wrong, right, so read it twice. Read everything twice. I get a lot of people who miss practice tests, if nothing else, and they go, oh, it said which is not one of the following. Oh, yeah, I forgot that. I think you remembered which is not on answer A, but by C, you had forgot that it was a not question. I told you, people tend to ignore misinformation and think that, you got the things you know that you know, things you know you don't know, but it's what you didn't know that you didn't know that caused the problems. No, I argue it's the things you thought you knew that turn out to be wrong. If I have this chest of drawers here and I have a drawer marked shirts, and in there's shirts, that's a true. I had information about that. But one of the drawers is marked private and it's locked, and I don't know what's in there, but I know there's something in there. So I know something that I didn't know. That's a true false. Things I know that I didn't know. There's a secret panel in the back, man. I didn't know about that. Right? That's false. Things I didn't know that I didn't know. But that's not where my missing missing shirt was. No, that's in the drawer marked pants. Now, most attacks, I will argue this week, come from that. Whether it's I could go right back to my teacher, Joe Lewis, who would always say, never come straight at a guy. It's like a brute force attack. When you come straight at a guy, the bigger, faster, stronger guy wins. But if I can get you to look left and I'm coming right. So that's why we throw fakes. We have head fakes, shoulder fakes, hip fakes, pump fakes, step fakes. I wanted you to think that. That's what I wanted you to think. Right? That's how phishing attacks work. That's how social engineering in general works. We have attacks, like the the Smurf attack. They wanted you to think that IP address was from your network. Attacks also come in two broad categories, passive versus active, and sometimes on the test, they'll just say, what type of attack is this? They'll describe something really technical, but the answer you just need to know is the category of attack. In a passive attack, someone's listening. Imagine like an Ethernet cable. I have a send pair and a receive pair. If you want to do some stealthy sniffing, cut your send pair. And all you'll do is receive information, and no one's going to know that you're even there. If someone's on the other side of this wall here and they're listening to my conversation, I can't tell. But I could have soundproofed the room. So passive attacks are undetectable, but they are preventable. You could have encrypted your data. Active attacks is when they are sending stuff. Denial of service attack. Someone keeps calling me up on the phone. I can certainly tell that that's happening, but I can't always stop it. Now, besides denial of service, we're going to talk a lot about covert channels. A covert channel is anytime someone's using a medium in a way it was not intended to be used to relay information. And there's a bunch of them. You can't stop them all. I remember watching the Flintstones cartoon show when I was a kid, and Wilma and Betty could flash their Venetian blinds and send Morse code. We'll talk quite a bit about these attacks all week. Now, security is generally thought of about prevention, detection, and response, three basic processes. There are three goals: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But the three processes we always think of as prevention. I have a safe, prevents you from getting to my money. But the safe doesn't last forever. Somebody with tools and a torch could break through that. So I have alarms that ring when somebody gets to the safe, and then I have guards that show up within the time I expect it would take to burn through it. And that's how safes are rated. 60 TLTR means 60 minutes with the tools, best tools and a torch. But really, from a security governance, steering, govern, and kyber, both come from the cyber come from the Greek kyber. So cyber and govern come from the same thing. Well, if you're going to steer, the most important thing is direction. That's why we give policies and procedures, standards, guidelines. These are directions, training, awareness. So sometimes that's the most important type of control. Now you could have training on how to prevent, detect, and respond. So it's kind of a parent to those processes. But it is often the most important thing, and we're going to talk a lot about it in the class. And one of my favorite cybernetics books, by the way, is probably "Oh, the Places You'll Go" by Dr. Seuss. If you have children, or if you don't, get that book. It's fantastic. One of my favorites is lines is, "You'll come to a place where the streets are not marked. Some windows are lighted, but mostly they're dark. A place you could sprain both elbow and chin. Do you dare to stay out? Do you dare to go in? And if you go in, should you turn left or right and 3/4, or maybe not quite? Or go around back, sneak in from behind? Simple it's not, I'm afraid you'll find, for a mind maker-upper to make up their mind." One of my favorite authors was Timothy Leary when I was growing up, and he had this theory that basically the first NASA and Russian cosmonauts and astronauts that went into space, looked at from the vantage point of 1,000 years from now, will be as significant an event in evolution as the first fish to smell air. And he feels that we live on the cusp of becoming a spacefaring creature. Well, Gerard O'Neill is a physicist at Princeton, and all the attention we see of environmental impact, whether it's global warming or climate change, these are not new issues. People were considering these, and Gerard O'Neill in '76, he asked his students, what is the best way to deal with our high technology lifestyle, considering all of the pollution it's not? When I was a kid, you used to be able to drink rainwater. I remember when they told us in the late '60s, you got to tell your kids stop drinking rainwater. It's now coming acid rain. It was late '60s, early '70s. It became a big thing. We're not allowed to eat snow anymore. My mother, no, don't eat that anymore. And that's the same. There was a river in Philadelphia called the Schuylkill. It's an Indian word. It means the place where we go to drink. You can't drink that water now. Well, the students, he thought, were going to come back with either go back to cleaner technologies or go back to a simpler time. Not go back, develop greener technologies or go back to a simpler time, but that's not what they thought. They thought that there's no way to go back, and that the greener technologies don't give us the same throughput, same output, energy output as like nuclear energy or whatever. But most of the damage at that time was being caused in manufacturing, and they felt the best place to do that would be in space. We would free up the Earth from so much of the damage because all this waste product and heat and everything would be out in space. But there was other side benefits. Manufacturing, for one thing, most of the energy in manufacturing is spent fighting gravity. Well, if you put it in zero G, it's less energy and less wear and tear on the machines. So it's way more efficient that way. And you'd also get better product, because a lot of products, any product that takes some time period to gel or harden or whatever, gravity is going to warp the design because heavier elements will get pulled to the bottom. But you'd get a better high integrity product if you build it in zero G. Now that would be a long commute. So Gerald O'Neill they developed these space colony concepts that are still the best designs that I know of. So I look at Elon Musk, who I love very much, his theories and stuff, but he wants to move people to Mars. Jeff Bezos is into Gerald O'Neill. So I'm much more in Jeff Bezos' camp. And you get more into these, but all of my slides, the background graphic is a design from a space colony from Gerald O'Neill. And the artists were Don Davis and Rick Gaitis. They're NASA scientists or artists. And you can use these graphics free, but please give them credit. So there we go. That's a credit to them. I'm a big Star Trek fan. If you're not, hopefully you will be by the end of the week, because it's going to help you pass your test. Now, for one thing, Star Trek, they belong to the Federation. Well, we have a federation. Most of the standards, international standards that we deal with, are ISO standards. A lot of people think ISO is an acronym for International Standards Organization. No, it's not an acronym. It's a word, come from the Greek. Actually, if you acronym their name in English, it would be IOS. ISO come from the Greek, meaning equal. So I don't care what country you're from. If you agree to stop at a red light and go on green lights, we can share the road. And I don't want to go back to a time before cars because people can't share the road. So that's the same with the internet. If we can agree, we can share this wonderful internet here. And blockchain people saying are making Internet 2.0, making it even safer. There are some testable ISO standards. 27,000 series are all of the security standards that we care about. 27001 is the standard for information security management systems. There will be a question on the test, maybe one or two. You don't need to know any details about it, not that I've heard, but you do need to know that it is a standard. It's an auditable standard. You can hire, my wife was an ISO 27001 auditor, come in and do audits for people and then get you certified, and you could put this little thing on your website or whatever. 27002, a sister document to that, is a guideline to help you develop your standards. Please remember that 27002 is a guideline. You don't have to follow it. There are suggestions only. If you've done any pre-study for this test, you may see a lot of old books and old practice tests talk about the Orange Book for standards on operating systems. They have not had an Orange Book question since 2007. That was a US standard. They have moved to the common criteria, and there are at least a half a dozen questions on the common criteria. That is ISO 15408. It is testable by the number as well. Not testable that I know of, but very cool. 17024 is for certifying people. And the very first IT test, or ICT, if you're from a different, only the United States says IT, by the way. Everywhere else it's ICT. And the ISO actually uses ICT. The very first ICT test to become accredited by the ISO is the CISSP. That's pretty cool. So if you pass your test, you fall under 17024. Some other lessons from Star Trek. You'll see cartoons or TV shows, comedies, where sometimes there's a devil and an angel on a guy's shoulder giving them advice. I always have Kirk and Spock. And I advise you, at least for your test, if I get one consistent feedback from my class after someone passes their test, it's always thank you for the Kirk and Spock because it really, really helped me. I recently posted a YouTube video on how they helped, and I got a couple of comments on YouTube so far. I'd only put it up last week, but the LinkedIn comments were great. And one guy, a former student, said, "Larry, not only did that help me with the test, I use it in life all the time." If English isn't your native language, sometimes some of the first feedback I get is, what's the difference between quantitative and qualitative, or objective versus subjective? I play guitar. A guitar is an object. You can be certain about the quantity of strings on it. If you count it properly, there is a quantity of 6 strings on that object. Kirk is more concerned with, did you like the song? Well, it depends on what you like in music. That's quality. And it depends on what you like. The person who played the guitar is a subject. And accreditation, well, if certification means to be certain, a very important word for us this week is actually just the root word cred. Cred means to believe. I can't find the Greek origin. I can find the Latin. Cred means to believe. So if something's incredible, you don't believe it. Once a system is certified to have whatever 8 gigs of RAM, it's up to senior management to accredit that solution and go, is 8 gigs of RAM appropriate? Do I believe that that's good enough for now? Just like when you claim to be, I claim to be Larry, but having a smart card provides credit to that claim. That's why it's a credit card. It's a credential. My driver's license is a credential, cred. Very important word for us. When you take the test, it's hard to prove answers right. It's a lot easier to prove answers wrong. When I'm in a live class, often I'll throw a pen up in the air, and I say, every time I throw this pen up in the air, I'm going to catch it. Well, it would take infinity to prove that right. That's why we don't have random number generators. We have pseudo-randoms, because it would take infinity to prove a random number generator is truly random. But I can drop the pen and go, oh, I guess I just proved that wrong. So I often say, let Spock take the test first, and they'll prove, well, it's not A and it's not B. And then Kirk is looking at the clock. He values time and money. He knows he spent $600 on this test and we got 3 hours. Spock, where are we on question 35? Captain, it's not A, because symmetric is much faster than asymmetric. And it is not B, because hashing is an integrity algorithm that has nothing to do with encrypting data. Is it C or D? Insufficient data, Captain. I've never been to this planet. I don't know who Ron Rivest is. Well, we haven't picked C in a while. Captain, that's not a logical way to pick an answer. Spock, what have you got? And I'll tell you what you don't have. We haven't got time. So at a certain point, you're just guessing, but try to eliminate the things you're certain are wrong. All right, get ready to take our first break here.
It's the time of the season when love runs high. In this time, give it to me easy and let me try with pleasure in hand.